in the city. This is Barbara, and thank you so much for being here as we continue our journey in learning what is the relationship between God and politics. This is something that I'd love to know because I have training in political science at a pretty high level from MIT, all but dissertation, ABD, PhD. And during the time when I was studying political science, those questions about relationship between God and politics didn't even enter my speech, because at that time, anything connected with politics was far, far away from churches. And I did not understand at that time that there's something much higher than relationship between the state and church. Because the state can be administrative and can have absolutely nothing to do with God. But the church is by definition body of Christ, so it is focused on life itself. And it took a long time for me to even start asking those questions. What is the relationship between God and the state? I know a lot about the relationship between God and the church, but that question about God and the state is fascinating for me. And I'm learning about it. I've been learning now for a while, and there are so many questions. And I realized how ignorant I was in my education about those questions, and I know that you are ignorant about it too. So we are ignorant together as we are asking God to show us knowledge about this very important matter. And we are here at Psalm 72 in our journey into the soul of politics, because ultimately God is the one who gives life to politics. So the soul is where there is mind and will and emotions. So right here we know that the questions connected with the soul concern politics, because politics is about will, is about thinking, mind, speech, and is about emotions. So in my journey, I'm just searching for those questions. And I encourage you to search for them too, because I think that there's something absolutely fascinating that we can discover by hearing from God Himself, hearing from the Lord. Psalm 72 begins with, "Give the king thy judgment, O God." Give the king thy judgments, O God. Wow. Here is the purpose of the king, that he receives judgments from the Lord. For me, this is big discovery, because it means that the king doesn't make those things up. He doesn't make judgments in his own thinking. He receives them from the Lord. This is magnificent revelation for me, because it means that we have misunderstanding about the role of the king. There's a lot of thinking about the nature of kings recently. There have even been protests, no kings, you know. There have been statements from political leaders about why they are not kings, but it is so ignorant, and I'm just watching this because I'm searching for answers about this question myself. But from political science perspective, this is something very important, because this may be the answer for us to bring in, to receive peace on earth from God Himself. So in this passage, give the king thy judgments, O God, we see that the mover is God Himself, who gives the king his judgments, which means there's communication and language conversation between God and His king. Wow. This is really fascinating, because the way we were taught or believe that the king is somebody who is lucky to get the throne and the crown of a country, and then pronounces his judgments and his laws. But here is a very different concept of a king. Here's the king, the ruler, the ultimate authority in the country that receives God's judgments. And this is what ultimate authority is, that we receive that communication from God Himself. We have divine communication in us because of our nature, of natural law. God created us. So we already have capacity to do it. But how to do it in the divine connection is something that we need to search for and receive from God Himself. So that's what I'm searching for, because I'd love to start this program with giving you reports of my conversations with the Lord. But this is what I'm searching for in this context of politics. Though in my personal life I have good connection with the Lord, but this is social, this is political, this is a different kind of speech than personal communication. And I think that we in contemporary world abandoned even search for it, and that is a mistake. People are searching for AI as the answer, artificial intelligence. How about divine intelligence? Isn't it something more valuable because it connects with kingdom of God, with divine kingdom, with His speech, with His intelligence, with His wisdom. Then Psalm 72 continues, as King David says, states this request: give the king thy judgments, O God, and thy righteousness unto the king's son. So once again, we have communication of divine righteousness that can be inherited, not through human way, but through divine way. God gives his judgments to the Father and then to the Son. So the righteousness both to the Father and to the Son come from God himself. And this opens the door for us to learn about importance of it. Because if a son of a king cannot really inherit righteousness from his father, but he can get it through his father's intercession from God himself. So this is great knowledge to have, because modern revolutions were triggered in many countries by matters of inheritance that created blockages in social life, and there was a belief that power and authority is inherited from the father to the son. But here we see that the relationship between father and the son is only the foundation and opportunity for God to give his righteousness to the son. So the mistake of many people in modern thinking about power and authority was that they can inherit it from their parents. This was a situation in all circles of aristocracy and nobility. And we see that, of course, the relationship between the father and the son is inherited, but the righteousness, the content of that inheritance depends on God. The God himself has to give it to the son. Ultimately, we have it in Christianity when the Father gives righteousness to his son, Jesus. So the inheritance doesn't come from his human, from a human father, but from God himself. So this is something that is worth thinking about, because if righteousness is what we can get from God in every generation, we should search for it. There's only a certain amount of things that we can inherit from our families, but this is righteousness, God's righteousness that can come from God to every generation. And I think that this is what we need to ask God for our current generations. There's so much depression and so many losses, and people of very young age seem to be lost in knowledge about how to live a good life. What is law? Some of the things that are happening are very destructive. There are also many wars in the world today, and participants are very young people who don't know how to talk to other young people, because they all make up their righteousness. They think that they have to do it themselves. So here we have hope that we can receive that righteousness from God in every generation. And that righteousness is not the same as it was for the Father. It's what is appropriate to the Son. I think that this opens the door for enormous hope, because we don't have to live in many conflicts of the past. We can ask God to give us His righteousness for the current times, for the current generations, and vision of the future that comes from His righteousness. I'm going to ask God for that. I'm curious myself about how to have my mind be open to this. Because just like you, I was taught that righteousness the righteousness in politics pretty much comes from books of political science. It comes from what our institutions used to do, from legal systems, from all kinds of infrastructure ways that defined measures. But here is hope that God can give us His righteousness for the current generation with His vision of how to develop politics. So right here we see the importance of God for politics. And I'm repeating it over and over and over to all leaders of the world. Abandon your old ways. Ask God for His righteousness to come to you. Because those old ways created horrible conflicts. We are living in a situation in which countries that have been very good friends are fighting with each other. People who grew up in the same territory, like in Europe, are fighting with each other. Some of the fight is kinetic, like between Kiev and Moscow, but some of it is very subtle, financial and legal, like in all matters of European Union. So we cannot continue like this, because those ways lead to nowhere, to emptiness, to hopelessness. But we can ask God to give us His righteousness for current times, for current generations. And Psalm 72 continues, God, He shall judge thy people with righteousness and the poor with judgment. This particular passage can refer both to the righteousness that King's son receives, but also to King himself, with the judgments that he receives from God. Now, clearly, this is living communication. We can read the Bible from the morning to the night, but if God doesn't speak to us, it's just another book. So every word there is divinely inspired, but there is still this higher level of communication that the Bible opens the door for us to communicate with God Himself. This is really awesome, because it transforms our thinking about politics from having hope in each other into receiving righteousness and judgment from God Himself. I wish I had known that earlier. This is I'm emotional about it because it heals my conscience from feeling despair in situations that human way would not be able to solve. But we can ask the Lord for His righteousness, and His righteousness always comes with life to do it. So it's life-giving. It's like well of living water. Then the psalm continues, the mountains shall bring peace to the people, and the little hills by righteousness. So, to all the people who are worried about the earth, the mountains shall bring peace to the people, and the little hills by righteousness. So, God's righteousness is healing for the earth. God's righteousness is what the earth can receive. The mountains shall bring peace to the people, and the little hills by righteousness. Another amazing knowledge that God uses the earth. We sometimes call earth Mother Earth, mountains, to bring peace to the people, and the little hills. So God's righteousness is not only about political life, but also about knowing that the source of peace comes directly from God, but also through the earth. This is very clearly written. The mountains shall bring peace to the people, and the little hills by righteousness. But this righteousness is divine righteousness. It is not something that I make up or you make up. This is righteousness that God gives to the mountains, and then the mountains bring this peace to the people, and the little hills. So we have this image here of giant creations, mountains, and little hills. And little hills can receive this goodness from the mountains. I think that in modern days we have so much knowledge about science, but we still don't know about the relationship that science has with God. Because if God can impart peace to the mountains, and then they shall bring that peace to the people, and the little hills, He can also do it through science. Science is a form of mountains, and I think that is ultimate strength of science when it is open to it. Then the psalm continues, He shall judge the poor of the people, He shall save the children of the needy, and shall break in pieces the oppressor. So you see here that is a very complex knowledge about communication between God the King and King's Son. they work in one purpose, and that purpose is to bring that divine righteousness to everybody, including the poor. Today, our current politics so often separates the poor from any political necessity, and there is so much suffering. Millions of people are homeless. They don't know how to survive in such circumstances. And then people are also often in despair because they are destroyed by oppressors. And here, the hope of justice comes from that structure of divine righteousness. So God is the key in this. The king and the king's son, without God's righteousness, would be just oppressors. So I think that we should continue our thinking about who is king and how a king should operate, and let God teach us. I invite him to teach us, to teach me, to teach all the No Kings protesters, to teach modern political leaders, and to guide us into his